Without a doubt, 2020 has been the year for COVID-19. We're in an ongoing pandemic, and it is on the forefront of everyone's minds. Whether it be discussed amongst healthcare experts, politicians, talk show hosts, whatever, it's inescapable. But when was the last time you heard about other diseases and conditions talked about in depth and fully highlighted? Probably somehow in conjunction with COVID, but purely on its own as its own relevant topic? I may be the only one thinking this way, but because the health crisis we are in currently, there's not enough attention going towards other ailments, conditions, diseases, and more. So today I wanted to focus on a topic that has been very important to me over the years and has impacted my family and those around me in a very critical way. Cancer. My general understanding for cancer started at an early age. One of my oldest friends, Liam Olive, was diagnosed with cancer when he was about 2 or 3, I believe. I remember he actually had to battle the disease twice. Though the times we would get together during and after all of his treatments were all lighthearted, jovial, and often centered around Pokemon and video games, I knew that he had a tough journey and he had to overcome many obstacles. During his fight, they had to amputate one of his legs. And you know what? He went through it all with so much poise and maturity. Growing up, he was one of my greatest role models, and I think that it's impressive to say that someone my own age was one of my greatest role models. It was through Liam that I was initially introduced to the American Cancer Society. Liam led a team called Liam's Lucarios, named after the notable Pokemon character, and would always have a booth at the Relay for Life event in Fishkill, New York. Going to the event was something I look forward to every year. It was always a great time to see Liam and his teammates, and we'd often engage in all the fun activities planned, along with walking the trails and playing Manhunt when it got late enough. Quick side note, one year I accidentally ran into a metal fence while playing Manhunt, and when I returned the next year, there was still a Connor-shaped dent in said fence. So that was my first glimpse at the community building that the American Cancer Society was all about. However, just being a kid, I still did not realize the full severity of what we were there for. I knew that it did a number to my friend, and I knew that people died from this. But it's hard to grasp the emotional weight when you're still that young. Now, over the years, I've known many people diagnosed with and affected by cancer, but I want to focus on 2 individuals right now. One of my favorite bands, Matchbox 20, has a song called 3 a.m. It is one of the first songs that I learned to play on guitar growing up, though I had no idea what any of the lyrics meant exactly. So before performing it for a talent show, I looked up the meaning to the song. To a casual listener, it may be perceived as a relationship song of sorts, but it's actually about the lead singer, Rob Thomas's mother, going through cancer and his perception of everything at the time. You see, I watched a video of when he performed on VH1 Storytellers when he explained he wrote the song about the time in his life when he was about 12 and 13 while his mom was battling cancer, and how confusing the entire time was for him. Though I knew what the song was about, I still did not fully understand it. That was until my own mother was diagnosed with thyroid cancer when I was about 14. Now, fortunately for her, it was an early enough stage and treatments for thyroid cancer had proved more than effective by this point. However, that doesn't lessen the impact that it had on her and the family. All of a sudden, the song clicked for me. Obviously, the stories behind Rob Thomas's mother's cancer journey and my mother's cancer journey are totally different, but it all boiled down to this. It was all about a scared little boy who is being torn and confused by something that is ailing someone he loves. So as a kid who was just getting out of middle school and getting into high school, I did what I could around the house to help my mom whatever way I could. But you know what they say, the treatment can take more out of you than the illness at times. It was a long and winding path for my mom to get back to quote-unquote normal. But after going through something like that, normal is never quite the same. During her treatments, I went to live with my aunt, uncle, and cousin for several weeks. It was decided that they could guarantee I would be cared for while mom and dad did what had to be done for mom's treatment at home. Now, I've always been close with my Aunt Ann, Uncle Chris, and Cousin Alan. Actually, Aunt Ann and my mom were extremely good friends growing up and became best friends over the years. It was through my mom that my Uncle Chris and my Aunt Ann met. My mom and hers relationship was no doubt the reason Aunt Ann was also my godmother. She had this zany personality and had such a warped sense of humor. The room lit up the moment she walked in, and she was one of the most personal people you would ever meet. She was an incredible role model growing up and played a huge part of my life. She, Uncle Chris, and Alan did all they could to make me feel at home during that time, and they were wonderful to me. But as one situation was clearing up, another was looming around the corner. The day we found out that my mom was totally clear of cancer, we found out that Aunt Ann was diagnosed with it. By this time, I was back at home, but what a bittersweet time this was. Aunt Ann's initial treatments proved well, and she was getting better. However, the treatments were rough on her nonetheless, all combined with other pre-existing conditions she was battling. And then for a while, it looked like she was in the clear. That was until in 2015 it came back, and it came back with a vengeance. They were doing all they could for her, but her health declined by the end of the year. Unfortunately, by December of 2015, she succumbed to cancer and passed away. This year marks 5 years since her passing. I don't think there is a single day that most of my extended family does not think of her. I think of and pray for my Uncle Chris and Alan and how they're doing, especially this time of year. Alan and I feel, have a very close relationship, and we're here for each other however we need. But I know that nothing could ever make up for this loss. My godmother was an extremely strong person, and the fact that it managed to take her down means that this could happen to anyone. Cancer does not discriminate, and that is why I find it extremely important for it to be continuously talked about and the research sought after. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Walsh Wednesday, the Reflective Series. When we return, I'm going to talk about how these moments led me to partner with the American Cancer Society. Later, we'll be talking to Nick Liporace, the Senior Community Development Manager with the American Cancer Society in Latham, New York. Besides Walsh Wednesday, I have another series that I produce, presented by the College of St. Rose of Albany, New York, in affiliation with the Student Development, Student Association, and the St. Rose Marketing Team. St. Rose Rocks is a web series that highlights music for the Golden Knights by the Golden Knights. Back for a limited run, St. Rose Rocks showcases the talent from the St. Rose community, whether it be from current students or alumni. Very similar to Walsh Wednesday, I sit down with the artists as we listen to 2 of their songs, talk about the backstories behind said songs, and we dive into their inspirations and aspirations. For more on that, you can follow St. Rose Rocks on the College of St. Rose Student Association Facebook page or the St. Rose Rocks YouTube channel. As I mentioned before, I was no stranger to Relay for Life events. I grew up attending the one in Fishkill supporting Liam and his team, while also partaking in the ones at my high school. So when I got to college, I saw that the Colleges Against Cancer Club was hosting their own Relay for Life, and we were looking for musicians to perform. I naturally wanted to throw my name in the hat, and I was one of the selected artists chosen to perform at the event. I ended up being scheduled late at night, around 10:30, to work around my work commitments. At the time, that ended up being one of my best shows I've ever performed. There was a stage on the quad all set up for Rose Rock the next day, so all the performers got to perform on this highly rigged professional stage. Besides that, I got to play for a couple hundred students, and it was one of the most interactive and receptive crowds I've ever played for. I still hold that night up to high esteem, and it was a great event overall. Besides the performance, this was also around the time I started the Walsh Wednesday web series, and I wanted to do an episode on the event. So I went around the whole day taking footage from the event and interviewing the 2 co-chairs of that Relay for Life. They were all grateful to have the video made about the event, and it was a great way for Walsh Wednesday to have gotten going. A few weeks later, I get an email asking all the performers from St. Rose's Relay for Life if any of us would be interested in performing for other relays around the Albany area. So I reached out to the person of contact, Nick Liporace, and sent a link to the Walsh Wednesday episode. He absolutely loved it, and he especially loved the song I included called Pray For Me. Pray For Me is a song off my first album that I wrote back in high school. When I initially wrote the song, it was about a slight health scare I had at the time. However, when my godmother passed away about a year after, I always dedicated the song to her. To this day, it is no longer my song, but hers. Nick shared the episode along with my information to Relay for Life chairs and coordinators in the area, and they too fell in love. So that summer, Nick arranged for me to perform at several Relay for Life events on the condition that I play Pray For Me at designated times, such as before, during, or right after the traditional silent lap. Since that year, I've performed for dozens of American Cancer Society events all over New York. The one thing that stands out most prominently to me everywhere I go is the sense of community. Since many of these events are annual, or on the list of many for these communities, there's a special bond that is forged through these events. It's heartwarming to see how they recognize and honor the survivors, the people we have lost, the caregivers, and each other. I love seeing how community and charity can come together, and to participate in these events and hopefully add something to the energy is one of my favorite things as an artist. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I did not get to see any of these communities I would normally visit, nor any of the new ones I was going to join. However, that doesn't stop the efforts going on to continue raising awareness and fighting the good fight. When we return, we're going to sit down with Nick Liporace as he shares with us what 2020 has looked like for the American Cancer Society. I'm pleased to announce that my latest album, Away From Home, is now out and available to stream and download on all main distribution platforms. That means you can find it on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Deezer, iHeartRadio, BandCamp, and more. Releasing this album feels like an ode to the old part of my life and the beginning of a new chapter. The best way to support is to buy the album off BandCamp. BandCamp works with artists so they receive more bang for their buck in regards to downloads and purchases. However, wherever you decide to listen to the album, it is greatly appreciated. Also, if you feel like supporting the music, this podcast, and my other creative endeavors, please consider subscribing to my Patreon page. All links will be included in the description of this podcast. So, consider welcoming Away From Home into your home this holiday season. A couple of weeks ago, I had the chance to speak with my friend and colleague, Nick Liporace. Nick had been my point of contact when it came to scheduling me to perform for Relay for Life, Making Strides, and other American Cancer Society events. I really wanted to sit down and catch up with him regarding the scope of the impact caused by COVID-19 on the American Cancer Society as a whole, along with his own district. But before we got into the meat of things, I asked him to describe his job title and explain the role of ACS for anyone unaware.
My name's Nick Liporace. I work with the American Cancer Society based out of Latham, and I am a Senior Community Development Manager, which is a fancy way of saying I work with community-based groups, committees, teams, and families to put on local events such as Relay for Life or Making Strides Against Breast Cancer. But the American Cancer Society is a nationwide organization, and we have been around for over 100 years. We're the largest private funder of cancer research in the world. We're only number 2 to the U.S. government. So if you had to ask me one thing that the American Cancer Society does, it would be funding cancer research. We have great events, which I know that you are well aware of, Connor. And we're in the community, helping the community to save lives, celebrate lives, and lead the fight for a world without cancer.
With all that being said, Nick also wanted to clear up a common misconception in regard to the American Cancer Society and awareness in general.
Yeah, and some people, not that they're wrong, they're very focused on supporting local. John is local. He's my neighbor. He has cancer. That's what I want to support. I don't want to support this big, giant organization. And I respect that. And we love John. Every neighborhood, every club, every family knows somebody. I'm just using the name John. And we need to support our loved ones. But supporting an individual, whether it's with meals or taking them to and from treatment, it doesn't help keep the next John, the next neighbor, the next loved one from getting diagnosed with cancer. Research is so important because once you have a breakthrough, whether it's for esophageal cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, once we have a better treatment, a medication, a better screening, then it's helping people in your neighborhood and worldwide. So I love what you're saying. You're absolutely right. Everyone who's involved with us loves us and is as passionate as you are, but there is sometimes a myth out there that, we're this big organization and we don't support locally because we can't necessarily give John a gift card for gas, but there are other local organizations that can do those things. We're really focused on the research.
As the American Cancer Society as a whole is very focused on the research, all the individual events are very community driven. And as I've seen over the years, it's really brought so many people together for such a great cause and created families out of all the pockets of people who have been affected by this. Now, with 2020 being the unprecedented year that it is, and knowing that majority of the ACS events are very social and revolve around that in-person connectivity, I asked him, what was that culture shock like?
Connor, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything is just business as usual. It's been very normal. It's been a lovely year. No. It was very... It was tricky. On Friday, March 13th, organization-wide, we got an email saying that or maybe it was on the day before, Thursday, Friday the 13th and the following Monday, we were going to all practice working from home to see if our systems could handle it. And we thought it would be, everyone's going to be home for a couple of weeks. We quickly learned that was not the case. For your listeners, you and I met each other through the program Relay for Life. Relay for Life funds 40% of the money that the American Cancer Society gets every year. It comes through that beautiful purple program that I love so much. Well, over 40% of all the money that comes in for the organization also comes in between April and June every year, because that's when we have our galas. That's when we have so many of our relays. So we quickly realized that we were going to be in trouble. We've been home since March. I am coming to you from the office. This is maybe my third time here in the office since March, and I'm only here because we're expecting a new printer to be swapped out. We're only allowed to be here one person at a time. I'm also getting ready for an event this coming weekend. So it's still very different. I always put myself as a volunteer first. I was a volunteer for 10 years before I became a staff partner. So as a volunteer, I have a lot of respect for the decisions that have been made. I think they were spot on this year, but we have had to suspend some of our programming. We've said goodbye to 1,000 of my colleagues. Some of them were furloughed. All of them have now been laid off. We were able to fund all of the research that we approved in the spring, but the ACS has peer-reviewed research that comes to a table twice a year, and we're not sure that we're going to be able to approve any fall research. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. We quickly suspended recognition gifts, travel, meetings, extra expenses like t-shirts and banners and stuff for all of our relays through June 1st because we just weren't sure if any of them were going to get to happen. Some events went virtual with various levels of success, and some new things came out of this crazy time that no one could have seen coming. We had folks doing virtual 5Ks. We had people doing purse bingos. I was part of a group. We had an 8-day challenge. We had 8 teams of 5, and we were trying to raise $8,000 in 8 days. I am not going to sugarcoat things. The ACS is expecting to be $200 million down this year than where we project ourselves to be. And it hurts a little bit because as of that week in March I was telling you about, we were actually a little bit ahead of our forecast. We were working really hard. It was going to be a really great year, possibly a green year. We were going to finish up year over year. But yeah, this 8-day challenge, Connor, is definitely one of the silver linings. This fundraiser would not have worked in a typical year, but in 8 days, we had 8 folks raised $32,000.
Oh my.
And all 8 staff partners, we dyed our hair purple. So we had folks from Buffalo to Plattsburgh to Albany that worked for the ACS come together, and we each recruited a team of 5 volunteers. They did the fundraising. We offered up our hair. So it was that first time that we were able to actually have fun through quarantine. It was we dyed our hair the last week of June. The summer was super unsettling. We just didn't know what to come. And now making strides against breast cancer, it's such a huge thing, October being such a big month for us in the American Cancer Society. A lot of our events can't happen. In Albany, we're used to having 17 to 18,000 people in Washington Park. So we had to get creative. Some folks came to the Capitol Center. Some folks decided to walk or track their steps in their own neighborhood. We had folks doing laps in Colony Center. So creativity has come out of this. And we do have some folks really dedicated and getting creative and trying to overcome. It's hit everyone for sure.
All the creativity from so many people is very inspiring. It really does show you if there's a will, there's a way. But I did ask, are there any in-person events going on?
Don't want to give false information based on where your listeners are. It is very much a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm. County by county, state by state, office by office. What I can say is, as a blanket statement, all of the American Cancer Society offices are closed right now nationwide. All of our Hope Lodges are closed right now as well. If you don't know what a Hope Lodge is, it's a place where a cancer patient and their caregiver can go, free room and board, activities like yoga, cooking classes, things to uplift your spirit. At the end of March, we just had to close all of them because it wasn't safe to have these cancer survivors in a communal space, number one. And number two, we are so grateful that we have so many, volunteers. Let's pick on your family, Connor. The Walsh family might decide that they're going to cook dinner for the local Hope Lodge on Thursday night, and they're going to come in there and cook. Well, we're doing that 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We can't have all those different families and groups coming in and providing meals. So that got suspended. The one thing I want to say about that is within about 10 days' time, we started to reopen our Hope Lodges with a different purpose. And now about half of our Hope Lodges are open as a place for first responders to go and rest, to change, to get respite, and to not have to bring the spread of the disease to their loved one. If you think about where we have a Hope Lodge, think about a metropolitan area. Think about probably near a big cancer center. So Manhattan, Burlington, Rochester, bigger cities. Those places are probably also dealing with higher levels of COVID-19. So I'm so proud that it's not something that's happening at all 34 Hope Lodges, but it's happening at about half of them where doctors and nurses and technicians are able to go, and whether it's they need a nap, a shower, or they need a little bit of a longer term thing because maybe they have a immunocompromised loved one at home. So you asked, in-person events, very sparingly.
I bet.
Lots of precaution. I did hold the Bark for Life of Albany Colony in September. It was a very, stripped down, unplugged version, if you will. We had a check-in table. We had a little relay store. We were selling masks because it doesn't get more 2020 than to sell custom masks.
Amen.
But folks normally at this event are encouraged to stay and celebrate and walk their dogs and watch some demonstrations. And instead, they were asked to essentially walk through our little loop of tables and please make it home safely. They were essentially just there to drop money off and take a picture in our photo booth and move on. So we're not able to have events where folks would be staying very long. But drive-through events, drive-up events, drive-bys, things like that are minimal contact and kind of keep things moving. That's what we're trying to have. But most of our events are still happening in a virtual space right now. Yeah, and Connor, I think that what's important is, and we are not talking about politics, but New York was very strict on how they handled things. And now we're one of the few places that we're still seeing increases. And by the time this airs, who knows what the state of everything will be. I have, since June, July, felt pretty comfortable with my mask in hand, traveling throughout the state. I've at least felt that I can see our state, and we have so many wonderful things to offer, from farms to rivers to camping. So, but some people, in some cities that wasn't the case. And for our cancer patients, somebody going through a cancer treatment right now, there are so many things that are normally in place, whether it be by the local hospital, the local American Cancer Society, or what, whatever it is, that we can't do right now. We can't hand out care packages right now. We can't sit with our loved ones. If my wife was going through, chemotherapy right now, I couldn't go in there and sit next to her. And that's just, it sounds so cold. It's an extra level of isolation. As it is, cancer is a very scary thing. It can be very isolating. You can feel very alone. We're having these in-person events as much as we can because our survivors miss the community. They've been so on their own for all of these months. They can't, even as things like movie theaters or casinos or hotels or whatever open up, their doctors are still telling them to stay home because their systems are compromised. So if we can host something outside or come on to a Zoom meeting or something to give them some hope, we owe it to them, because they're fighting a fight that should never be alone, and they're more alone than ever right now.
The next thing that Nick said really made my stomach drop.
Connor, I just want to share with you some really startling things that are going to come out of this. The pandemic is messing up economies around the world. Businesses have closed. Schools, oh my goodness. Educators, my heart goes out to you. And when I say educators, that now means parents and grandparents and daycare workers. I can't imagine what you're going through. But research, and I'm not saying cancer research, I'm just saying research in general, people are just starting to, unfortunately, realize the impact that this is going to have. So at the ACS alone, in the next 18 months, we're expecting more late-stage cancer diagnoses than we've ever seen before, because folks are skipping their screenings, they're skipping their routine appointments, some at the advice of doctors. And I'm not saying don't listen to your doctors, you have to, but you and your doctor need to make a plan that works for you, and you really are weighing everything out. On top of late-stage cancer diagnoses, we have researchers that were in the middle of research in February, March, April. If their lab was closed for a week or a month or a quarter, and I'm not a researcher, Connor, I think you know that, so I'm not going to try to get too deep, but a lot of research depends on blood samples, tissue samples, cells. Those things can't live forever. So in many cases, the samples, the study could have died, and now that researcher doesn't necessarily have the funding or the time to gather those samples again. So we're also, not only are we going to see more cancer and other diseases too, diagnosed in the next 18 months, we're also going to have less breakthroughs and less research over the next decade, because the research that was happening this past winter, it wasn't making a breakthrough that people would have experienced right now. It takes 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 years for something to go all the way through its, not just its research stage, but its clinical trials and so forth. So in 20 years from now, when somebody's having a really horrible time with a cancer diagnosis, we can probably pinpoint it because there was a lack of research and movement happening in 2020. So that's why we need the support, and we need to have people talking about it now, because we just can't afford to wait, unfortunately. We can't. I would love the volunteers that I work with, the committees that I'm tasked with overseeing. So I would want nothing more than to be able to say, listen, it's a scary time right now, and this is a volunteer role that you've signed up for. We don't have to do anything for the next year or two. I'll check in with you then, but we can't afford to do that. Somebody asks, why are we still having an event? Or why are you asking for money when so many people are out of work or, looking for other things? And it's just because we can't afford to wait.
No, of course. And I think that's something that a lot of people aren't necessarily thinking about in regards to the overarching research and just the global effect of all this. Obviously, people think and talk about things directly in their communities. They talk about their families. They talk about the economy. And they talk about, when they do talk about healthcare, they're talking about COVID specifically, because that's just kind of the thing going on right now. But I don't think that's a conversation being had often enough these days, thinking about the research that would be going on right now for cancer and for God knows how many other diseases, how many other things that have all been stalled.
Diabetes. The last 5-10 years, there's been so many breakthroughs in those realms. I cringe to think that that's coming to a halt right now.
Yeah, because when you get the ball moving, it's moving. But then when you stop, it's tough to get going again. Body in motion stays in motion, a body in rest stays at rest. And unfortunately, that's very true about the scientific community, not because of people not working at it, but the limitations and the roadblocks that are put in their way.
Yeah, for sure.
Our actions make a difference. And this conversation with Nick reminded me to be mindful of that. And I know this year has been limiting and debilitating in a number of ways, but there are still so many things that can be done for the sake of progress, all with the help of some creativity. In regard to ACS, I asked Nick, what are some of the best ways to get involved right now?
Yeah, we have committees that are meeting virtually. If the term committee sounds scary, maybe you just try with, helping with one thing or one event. So I would have you reach out to your local American Cancer Society office. The best way to do that is by calling our 800 number, 1-800-227-2345. Let them know where you are. They're going to know what's available in your area. Maybe you're a dog lover, so it's Bark for Life, or maybe you're a college student and your college has an ACS on campus chapter, or somewhere in between, whether you have an hour to give each week or a day to give each year. We're definitely looking for volunteers still. Some areas, as you can imagine, have more or less in-person things available. Things like coming to the office to clean out the garden. We're fortunate enough where our office is attached to the World's Only Hope Club. They have an organic garden. They have a nice little courtyard. It looked like Jumanji. So we just had the volunteers come in last week to clear things up. It's not just dollars. I think that's the number one thing for your listeners to know. We're looking for time, we're looking for talent, and we're looking for treasure. Whether you have an hour to give, whether you're a singer or a seamstress or a potter, we can use those types of things to raffle off and raise more money. And we're looking for treasure. That is your savings. That is your funds. That is your, what you're good at. But it's not just one thing we're looking for. Everyone, I'm sure, is able to, think of something that they're able to give. And I hope to work with some of your listeners in the future, Connor.
That'd be awesome. I see. It's the little moments. It's the little wonders. It's just connecting with that one person, what a difference that can make. And hence why I really wanted to offer this, because during the time alone, during COVID, I definitely had my experience of like, who am I? What is going on? But then from that kind of that low point, I don't know, I also found a trampoline somewhere in the darkness, and now kind of trying to raise not just myself, but other things up at the same time.
For sure.
As Nick said, it's not all about the money. It's about the time. It's about the energy. It's about whatever you can put into something. Now, with the holidays right around the corner, there's a lot of people and places out there looking for handouts and for money and for things like that. And it can feel overwhelming, for sure. So whatever it is that you decide to put your time, energy, and attention to, go for it. Go all in, because just like what Nick is saying with the American Cancer Society, there is a need for people and community and togetherness. So as you're looking forward into this holiday season and into 2021, I highly recommend looking into giving some bit of yourself to some outside organization. ACS might be one of them. Whatever you're passionate about and whatever that you feel that strongly about, I recommend to go out there and help. Every little person, every little action makes a difference. So I hope that you keep that in mind looking forward, and I hope that this interview really had helped to open your eyes about a few things in regard to healthcare, charities, cancer, and just the way that COVID has shaped things across the board this year. Right now, I'm going to leave you guys with a song that I previously mentioned on this program, 3 a.m. by Matchbox 20. I had recently recorded the song for a competition I was submitting to, and you can check out the full video up on YouTube. But right now, I wanted to share this acoustic, unplugged version of the song for all of you guys right now. It has a lot of meaning to me, and I hope it has a lot of meaning to you guys after hearing it. I dedicate this song to any of y'all listening who have been afflicted by cancer in any way, shape, or form in the past or currently battling. Just know that you have an ally in me, and I am with you 100% of the way. We love you, we support you, and we wish you all the best. She said it's cold outside, she hands me my raincoat. She's always worried about things like that. She says that it's all gonna end and it might as well be my fault. But she only sleeps when it's raining, and she screams and her voice is strained, and she said, it's 3 a.m. and I must be lonely. And she says, baby, I can't help but be scared of it all sometimes. And the rain's gonna wash away, I believe it. She's got a little bit of something, God, it's better than nothing. In her color portrait world, she believes she's got it all. She swears the moon don't hang quite as high as it used to. Sleeps when it's raining, and she screams and her voice is strained, and she says, it's 3 a.m. and I must be lonely. And she says, baby, I can't help but be scared of it all sometimes. Rain's gonna wash away, I believe. Yes. She believes that life is made up of all that you used to. Clock on the wall has been stuck at 3 for days and days and days. She believes that happiness is a mat that sits on a doorway. But outside, it stopped raining. And she says, it's 3 a.m. and I must be lonely. And she says, baby, I can't help but be scared of it all sometimes. And the rain's gonna wash away, I believe it. Again, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Walsh Wednesday Reflective Series. As always, I'm Connor Walsh, and I'm glad we get to spend some time.